with David and Stacy Whited, where we break down current events and examine culture through the lens of conservative Christian values.
All right, Flyover family.
I'm so excited.
Get your pencils sharpened, get your notepads out, get your brain turned on, ready to go. This is going to be an episode that I think could break the internet. It's something that we really need out there. We need to separate out there what's going on between the things that people think and the things that people know. And it's kind of hard to know if you don't know somebody who has actually been in the inside circle, who knows what's going on. Been excited about this video for a while, about doing this recording, because there's a video that went around kind of virally a few weeks ago that I think you're going to remember. We're going to play a clip of it. Today's guest is a PhD in psychology, behavioral psychologist, Stanford degree in political psychology. She taught leadership classes to some of the top CEOs in the world through summer courses at Harvard University. She's fluent English, French, and Spanish. She was a member of Trump's transition team. She's part of a special task force with the Department of Defense. There's over 9 million Americans that live abroad and that work and that are working outside of the United States. So the influence is quite broad. There's an organization called Republicans Overseas, which she is the global vice president of. Super excited today to have Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes.
Yay!
Thank you for having me.
Well,
we are so excited. We've been waiting for this interview. We couldn't wait to have you on today and to learn so much. We're ready. We have our pens. We've got our papers. We're ready to learn from you today.
Okay. I'm in your hands.
A lot of stuff to jump into, and we're going to get into the things that have kind of gone around virally into the most, the front and center of people's minds. But whenever I hear somebody talk, I'm kind of, okay, this, but sort of what's your background or what's your platform, for saying these things. I want to give people a context for your understanding of business and human psychology, behavior, why people do the things they do. And then obviously as that transition, how you became such an important part of the political space over these last several years, specifically as it pertains to President Trump.
Oh,
so
wow.
what did it take to create a Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes? Like how'd you come off the assembly line?
One of the things that I constantly say to God is that I know that you put me through these things, because if I didn't go through them and understand them, then how could I help my clients? And when I had a private practice, my patients, because then if I'm not continually working on myself and I'm stuck in a place, then whomever is wanting me to be their support or their feedback, then I'm going to keep them stuck. So I have always, whether I've stayed in therapy for a long time during my probably first 20 years of practice, and then I've often gone back to have a chance to explore and look at my own reactions and where I might be stuck or what my own issues are, and to bring that right forward to the miracle that happened with GB News is how I really consider it, is that I had one serious flaw that I had been praying for a long time. I mean, when I say a long time, I mean a long time, for God to help me through it. And he did. It was like one day I knew that I'd made it, and it was just like, wow. And then I prayed for 10 days, God, tell me, that the only thing that has really motivated me is, can I make a difference? I don't want to go back to the corporate environment. I don't want to go back to, leading a bunch of people, but I won't be motivated unless I know that I can make a difference. So please just guide me. And it wasn't my first time on GB News, and it definitely wasn't my first time with Stephen, who I can always predict is going to be negative.
Especially at the end of the interview.
I was so grateful that it happened then.
Yeah.
You know, because he starts them off that way. And I have to say to him often, why are we going to start negatively? We have to think about who's watching and listening to us.
Yeah.
They didn't wake up this morning to have that.
Yep.
And so I've been very touched by the response to it. And yet when people say, oh, that was such courage. Oh, honestly, God gave me 9.5 minutes. It was God. And normally I go in there like real, they ask me the question, I give them the answer, etc. And I never watch my interviews, but I watched that one and I realized that the opening, I threw their question back at them. Mm-hmm. And that was just me. That was, and it was like, oh, I mean, in retrospect, it was God just letting me be me and making it work. And I've been eternally grateful because I really did want to do two things. I wanted to continue being a commentator in the media in whatever way I could. And I love writing, and Newsweek turned me down. I've had a couple of things on Breitbart and in the Telegraph, but I've got Substack now. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And so I'm able to share all of that, and the subscribers keep growing, and God gave me a gift.
Let's tell people real quick on how they can find you. We're going to dive into this actually analysis that you did on President Trump, I think back in 2015 as this conversation began, but you got a Substack article on it called Why Donald Trump Has the Perfect Presidential Temperament. You break down personality versus temperament and really use, to kind of almost Jordan Peterson-y kind of way, really get into the mind and why it applies, in this world. All of the links to all of your social media is going to be down in the links below. So people, you're an incredible follow on Twitter. And so we'll have that link below, Truth Social. But this Substack really is something that people need to go and check out. They don't need to just hear from you right now. As we're moving into the future, they're going to need to be hearing from you in November of 23 and February of 24 and so forth, because your mind is always working, and you have a way of taking all of these pieces and then very succinctly making sense and putting on the table. Before we jump into that clip, though, I want to comment on one thing, and I wrote this quote down. I wish I would have brought it into the studio with me, but you said, I think you're speaking with Nigel Farage, and it shows you the kind of circles that you run in and the people that respect and value your opinion and take. We reference often on this show this idea of the American spirit. And I think that's one thing that was underestimated. Stacey references this a lot. The people has underestimated the American spirit. Now,
that we could actually get knocked down and not just come up, but actually come up swinging even harder. Because, I look at like what they've done to the DOJ, to parents or people that were there on January the 6th, parents that are showing up at school board meetings. And they think if they show up at their house, they're going to scare them enough that they won't want to do anything anymore. And they underestimated the human spirit, or I'd say the American spirit, that they knock us down, but people are getting back up and being like, no, I'm not staying on the ground. In fact, I'm going to come at this even harder. I'm going to show up at more things. I'm going to, and I think that's really important that we address that as Americans.
And you have that. Now you're commenting, here from the UK, but I want to read this quote from you. Because I'd say when you look at the news, when you look at the things, you look at the stories, you almost get a bigger platform for being a victim nowadays. You get a bigger platform for being a whiner or for, just different things. Our country didn't get where it is in accomplishing the things we have on those kind of spirit. We probably been, would never accomplish anything we did as a nation, that all the things that are good. But you said that this philosophy that you have, and it came from your parents, I think, but you said you always got to earn your keep. Work hard, be innovative, create something. I mean, those are all powerful principles, I think, are the American spirit. You said every day you have to ask yourself, am I making a difference for other people?
Wow.
I mean, that should be stitched on a pillow and put in every living room in this country and probably the world. Can you just comment on that quote? Because I think if people grab that and they grab your social media handles, this interview would already be a tremendous success?
Wow. You know, when you live with something like that, and it's just been part of your nature, you're giving me pause to have to think about it, because I wasn't raised. We always had to leave a bite of something in the refrigerator for someone else.
Wow.
It went all the way down to I mean, then it'd be like, you know, that much left, but you left a bite for someone else. You know, you always have to think about the other person. It doesn't mean you don't take care of yourself and you don't think about yourself, but who are you in relation to what you do and what you stand for? And you can say a lot of things, but it's what you do that really says who you are.
That is very true.
Yeah, the idea of leaving every person and every place a little better than you found them.
Yep.
We could snap our fingers and we could say, okay, well, President Trump's in there tomorrow and everything's going to be fine. But everything's going to be fine because we all do our part.
Yeah.
And, you know, we one of our sayings here, everybody was kind of hoping that Donald Trump would do 80 million things to save America. And the answer is we need at least 80 million of us doing one thing each day to save our own country. And you really are doing that in a major way. So let's jump into that clip, if you don't mind.
First of all, before you set it up, I want to, it really jumped out at us initially because President Trump retruthed it. And which was really cool. I mean, that had to feel really good to see that, which drew a lot of attention to what had happened there. And then not just President Trump, but then General Michael Flynn retruths, that from President Trump as well.
I mean, for Flynn to say such a clear presentation of what we're facing and what will likely happen, #MAGA, our freedom must be guarded.
President Trump said, Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes is fantastic. Everyone has got to watch her interview on election fraud with the poor sap who got taken apart by her. Thank you, Don Jr., for putting this masterpiece out for the public to see. I mean, it's true. You did such a great job.
What did you think when you saw that?
I was surprised. I was surprised. And I felt good, to be honest. I felt better by General Flynn's because it was really concrete.
Yes.
And that, I mean, the fact that Donald Trump, it was wonderful because then people would not be trying to discredit me as much.
Yes, that's true.
And then with General Flynn giving the matter of fact, this is wonderful because now hopefully people are going to think about this. And then I discovered that it did connect with people.
Well,
no doubt about it.
Connected. This has been retruthed, reshared, retweeted, texted, repeated, shared at conversations and water cooler stations around the world. I want to take the time to play it if people have not seen this clip. And then I want to do basically, if you follow sports, kind of like, hey, we're going to play the game film, but then we get to sit down with, the starting quarterback here and break down, like, what were you thinking in all of these plays? We got clips from everything from the sword ceremony with the Saudis, and we got to talk about 1871. We're talking about Vatican gold. We're talking about Queen Elizabeth and the hand gestures. We're going to do a play-by-play breakdown of some of these things that when they happened in the moment, they were fresh. Some people kind of, that there's the current distractions going on, but I think each of these are significant. And to get the opportunity to break down this game film with you, I think is the best use of our time.
No doubt about it. So let's watch that clip real fast and then we'll come back, Dr. Jan.
Well, let's talk to Jan Halper-Hayes, who's a US political analyst, and he's here in the studio. Good to see you, as always.
Good to see you.
There's so many people putting this down as a political conspiracy theory, but actually there are real questions to be answered here.
There are?
Yeah, of course there are. Of course there are.
What he's being accused of, but what part do you think is to answer that the 2020 election is going to be litigated because of this? They've made a huge, huge mistake with this one. Because even though we thought what was going to happen was they were going to go after him for treason or sedition, but they did criminally charge him, but they didn't go to that extreme. As a result, he has due process, so he can subpoena people. and bring things in. Now, let me say something about this 2020 election, is that Biden is the legitimate president, but he's the legitimate president of what is now the bankrupt U.S. corporation. And that was a treaty in 1871. Well, on September 12, 2018, Trump created an executive order. Within that, he outlined in future elections any kind of foreign or domestic interference, specifically for the 2020 election. So we say, how did he know some of these things were going to happen? Election integrity on both sides of the aisle is tough. It's really tough. But what this has done is it's opened the door for Trump to present his case.
Well, that's a good thing, isn't it? Because, what we see on this side of the pond is a very difficult situation where the legal system is politicised in the United States, which is abhorrent to us over here. So the fact that Trump can subpoena, some people saying it's a mistake by Jack Smith, but actually he can subpoena, people can actually see evidence from both sides. That's a sensible move. Exactly.
And it's a great mistake by Jack Smith that he's done that. Absolutely great. See, the thing is, think about Edward Snowden and all the information he had. Think about the fact that our military, our Department of Defense Space Force, if you think that they don't have the actual real results from the election, then you're fooling yourself.
Yeah, but what we do know with this is we're told that there are plenty of notes from people, including Vice President Pence, that there are some recordings of Donald Trump acknowledging that actually what he said in public was nonsense. That some of these states, whether he claimed he was out saying look, Detroit, it's corrupt, it's all corrupt, the results are corrupt. And that when in reality he knew it wasn't. That's illegal.
But you know what? That's what someone's claiming, but that's not the fact, and that's not what Donald Trump really has ever said. He's been very, very clear. I mean, the issues were, for example, in Pennsylvania, the Supreme Court of the state of Pennsylvania stepped in and changed some of the election laws. Under our Constitution, it's only the state legislators that can do that. 2,000 Mules, the film that came out, what they did, they spent over $4 million tracking the phones. And the reason it's only 2,000 mules is that based on the visits to the drop boxes in Georgia, they had to have gone over 10 times. And they've got all the film for that. So the thing is that the election integrity is so different and so problematic in every single state. But that doesn't mean that the machines didn't do something, that there were some other kind of finagling, but the long and short... Go ahead.
Well, it doesn't, but that's where conspiracy comes in, is it? To say, well, it doesn't mean that something didn't happen. Well, there's no evidence that it happened. I mean, there's how many court cases did the Trump campaign try to bring? Nothing's gone in his favour.
Okay, wait a minute. Everyone, the media goes, oh, there were 60 court cases that were rejected. No, there were 3. He won 2, he lost 1, 57 were never heard because they had no standing. And standing means that the person bringing the case has to claim some kind of impact or injury. So it's really, the media did that, and they're great at doing that, but it was a fallacy in there. And the thing is that, I sit on a task force at the Department of Defense, and the thing is, they've got the goods. They've got the goods, and Trump knew that if he presented any of the goods early on, we'd have a civil war. That he really felt that the people needed to see how bad it could get.
And that's the sense that we're getting from Trump's lawyer about what his defence is going to be. So this is all going to be based on free speech, the First Amendment in the US Constitution, that he had a right to say what he believed. And he believed that the election results were not as was put out. But the point is, if you live in a democracy and you believe in a democracy, then that means that even if you don't like the outcome of an election, you respect that because it's a democratic vote.
Well, a democratic vote, and so therefore he should be silent about it.
No, he has a right to speak, but the issue, of course, is if he then acts to subvert that election result.
Oh, so that because you think he's being criticized because in Georgia he said, can you find me 12,000 votes? Or, the thing is, he didn't try to subvert anything. What he's really done is he set up the deep state to come out, and that's why we're seeing all these things. I mean, it was revealed with whistleblowers and Hunter Biden's ex-best friend that in 2015, the head of Burisma gave Joe and Hunter Biden $10 million bribe. In 2018, Joe is on TV publicly saying that he threatened that unless they got the prosecutor fired, that he wasn't going to let them have their $1 billion in support. In 2019, Trump calls Zelensky to find out about what went on to get the prosecutor fired, and he gets impeached. I mean, we've lived with it for a long time.
We're almost out of time. I just want to pick you up on one thing. You said earlier on, Donald Trump has been very clear on this. Is he a man that you believe? I mean, look, he's about as believable as a chocolate teapot, isn't he?
Look, I know that. Oh, thank God you got the negativity in at the end and not the beginning. I can always count on you for that. Always.
But it's a legitimate point to say that Donald Trump is a man who always speaks the truth. That can't be the case. I mean, it's hardly the case of any leader, to be fair, but, I mean, definitely not Donald Trump.
Well, I don't know if I said everything or always, because I do call him the embellisher-in-chief, because he's a marketer. But in terms of telling us things, optics, you better believe that he's very much a straight shooter in terms of actions that he's going to take or what he thinks needs to be done. They made fun of him because they assumed he broke protocol and walked in front of the Queen. No, if you go back and look at it, you will see he looked at her. She gave a wave with her hand. He proceeded. She took a couple of steps, he stopped, and he waited for her to join. That was an optic to tell us that he then was going to bankrupt the U.S. corporation because it was the Vatican, the Crown, and the U.S. that was part since 1871. And we were giving you our tax dollars. We were paying back. Forget this Tea Party and without taxation, without representation. We owed you a lot of money because you helped us in the Civil War. And so that is what Trump has now, he told the Queen, I'm ending this. We're dissolving this corporation. We're going to go back to being a republic and we'll all be separate. The Pope wasn't happy. You should find the picture of him visiting the Pope. It took 650 planes to remove our gold from the Vatican Bank.
I'm not very happy about it, Jan, to be perfectly honest. We could do with your money at the minute. Keep it flowing, I say. Jan Halper-Hayes, really good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
You too.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0. When I invented My Pillow, it had everything you'd ever want in a pillow. Well, now there's new technology that makes it even better. My Pillow 2.0 has my patented fill combined with a cooling fabric with temperature regulating thread. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
Visit MyPillow.com.
Do your feet ache and throb in pain with every step you take every day of your life? Well, kiss those days goodbye with slippers from MyPillow.com. How about that flimsy, flat little excuse for a pillow that's nothing but 8 hours of disappointment, causing you pain in your neck, every single night. You can wake up with nothing but butterflies and rainbows around your head with a MyPillow pillow. Those hardwood floors hurting your old bones? No more with a MyPillow dog bed. Are your towels worn thin, flimsy, more patchy than Joe Biden's memory? There's nothing better than absorbent towels from MyPillow.com. For all of these products and more, go to MyPillow.com and use promo code FLYOVER for up to 66% off.
Wow,
oh my goodness!
So good.
All right, Dr. Hayes, I've not stopped wearing a Trump 2020 band yet. My mind is kind of never move forward. So that's kind of where we're standing. I think Donald Trump's the greatest president that we've ever had, maybe minus George Washington, just because the idea of him having everything in the world and just giving it over, was so unprecedented in human history. But that aside, I think is the greatest leader that we've had to lead our nation. I could watch that clip over and over and over, but every time I watch it, I just want to ask you about 1,000 questions. So I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you just kind of guide the dissemination of those bombs you dropped. And again, I do, to quote President Trump, I do feel sorry for that poor sap.
Well, let me tell you a little secret. They were picking me up at 6 a.m, and I work East Coast hours. So I don't usually go to sleep till 2 or 3, sometimes later, because I could be dealing with people on the West Coast. And I was so afraid that I wasn't going to wake up if I went to sleep and I was going to miss my pickup. I stayed up all night.
Oh, wow.
And so when I'm looking at myself in that interview, I'm thinking, it doesn't show. I didn't have any sleep whatsoever. And once again, I can only say God guided me, because you wouldn't have known that I hadn't slept in, 30 hours or whatever. Yeah.
Nobody would ever know that with the way that you looked, as well as just your mentally,
sharp.
You were so sharp. And like you said, even at the beginning, when you questioned him and you put it back on him, he was kind of taken back, like, he kind of stuttered and stammered around. He didn't even know what to do.
The judo move right from the jump.
Well, because they're used to me being so good in responding. And then the other reason I prayed is that probably for the past year, I used to really love doing the interviews, even when they put the Democrats for us to go back and forth and et cetera. But I was so frustrated because the media's Trump derangement syndrome had gotten so bad that I wasn't even being asked intelligent questions. I wasn't even being able to convey anything. Mm-hmm. And so I would just be so angry that I started turning interviews down, because and again, God guided me, and I wasn't doing my usual, okay, I'll be a good question answerer, etc. So, it was very freeing. It was really freeing, because I knew certain things and I wanted other people to know them. And in fact, I had been asking Nigel to get back on his show so he and I could break it. And that didn't happen. And it was probably much better, because it was a morning breakfast show, and not everyone follows Nigel's 7 p.m. show. And it was really the few things that I really enjoyed pointing out. You made fun of Trump breaking protocol with the Queen. Not at all.
Let's get into that.
Yeah, let's play that, because you can break it down for us. We actually have a video that you can kind of talk through as it's playing here.
Give us some context.
All right. So he's telling her, can you go back a little to when?
The very beginning.
Yeah. Okay,
so she's obviously telling her,
and there's the hand.
Yep.
Look, and he's telling her. I mean, she's telling him, go. There it is, right there. And so he starts walking. Then he stops. She goes behind him. He's waiting for her. And then they start in unison.
So good.
And, I mean, it's right there. And, you know, we've got these liberals talking about microaggressions and everything else. Well, there's a micro expression. Mm-hmm. And she was cluing him in because they had worked it out ahead of time. See, he's just standing there waiting for her. And then he proceeds. So it wasn't that he broke protocol. He needed to use that situation as an optic. The same as when he went to Mount Rushmore and he said, I've got our country back.
Mm.
Yeah,
that's huge.
Those are the things that people need to listen to. Now, during the 2016 campaign season, I used to do a piece on Sunday morning on one of the shows at BBC, and I would explain how to connect the dots, how to understand what the messages that Trump was giving us. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget one time when John Pinar said to me, you know, when you're on, it makes so much sense. And then their judgment comes back into play. I was a broken record, literally, throughout that primary season up to 2020. You need to listen to him and connect the dots. Mm-hmm. You get so busy judging him for whatever reason. And honestly, do you think he really cares you don't like that he speaks out or he's gruff? What he's trying to do is he's trying to role model so these feckless Republicans would put something in their backbone to make it less flimsy. You know, he's always sending a message. And if you're busy judging, then you're not hearing the messages that he's sending.
And so much of what people see has been manipulated. I don't know if our producer can pull up the image of him feeding the koi fish. I think he's with the president of Japan, or the prime minister of Japan at the time. And you know, they had a box of fish food, and they're supposed to feed it. And Trump dumps. They kind of give him instructions. He dumps the food in there. And then they just play that clip like, oh, he's a glutton. He gave the fish too much. All this kind of stuff. They don't play that. Then the guy he's with does the exact same thing. Trump simply did what he was, instructed to do. But the media manipulated that. If you just grab people off the street right now, if they only catch leftist media, they're going to be like, yeah, he embarrassed us in Japan by giving too much fish. Mm-hmm. He likes fast food and McDonald's, and he's a glutton. And like, why would he have overfed these fish? There's all these narratives that are led. And it's just daily. It's like the opposite of what they do, with Joe Biden. They prop him up to make him, seem, competent. And they, manipulated the message against President Trump so badly that if people didn't put in a little effort and see the whole clip or look at the context, they just didn't know.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. When he had said, I am putting a moratorium on people coming to our country from the Middle East, he did that. And I can't tell you how many people came up to me over the course of that whole primary season into him being elected, asking me, do you think I could ever go to America? Will he ever let me in? I said, that was a law passed by our Congress under Obama because we couldn't vet certain people properly from these 6 countries. That is it. But did they explain it? Oh, no. They just give their interpretation. And that's the other thing that makes my work difficult with the DOD, is that it is hard to get into their thinking process, their mindset, and how they even structure things. I finally had to learn that I can't figure it out. I will never figure it out, but I understand the dynamics. They only look at things subjectively. They make their own interpretations. Everything is self-evident, meaning they reinforce themselves or are reinforced by the herd because they just repeat what everyone else is saying. They do not have a strategic reasoning ability. They look at life from the perspective of ideal or what's wrong and how it should be. I've always said to my clients, don't should on me. There are no shoulds, you know? Because the minute you say should, who said? Who issued that edict? Yeah. And the other part is that if you don't agree with them, then one, you will be cut down all the way to you might have to be annihilated or exterminated.
Wow.
And that's how they deal with things. How did our cancel culture come about?
Yep.
You know,
It's true.
I'm finding it very amusing because there are a few people on Twitter, because in 2016, August 3rd, 2016, the BBC called me very early in the morning, and I made a comment that I didn't know if I was going to vote for Trump because his behavior actually seemed a bit unhinged to me, and he had just succeeded. I had just been at the convention with him. He was not acting like the triumphant winner. And people try to throw that back on me. Then when he hired Kellyanne Conway and Steve Bannon, I did another interview, and I said, in the meantime, because of my role at Republicans Overseas, I have a very close relationship with the RNC. And I called someone up to ask what was going on. And it turned out that after he succeeded, Reince Priebus was trying to talk him into dropping out.
Really?
And yes. And that's when it came about of let Trump be Trump. And once it was let Trump be Trump, that behavior was done with. It never resurfaced. But people only want to use that to discredit me. Oh, but the other thing I love is that apparently AI, asking AI a question, and also Ancestry.com has me born in 1949, and I'm related to Stephen Halper. And my brother is dead, but he was born in 1947 and died in 2007. Sorry, he wasn't even born till 1963. And, you know, it's like, okay, frankly, if those are the ways you're trying to discredit me, keep it coming.
Exactly.
Because it's
So all
helping
you got-
me do my job that much easier in dissecting your mindset and how you think and how you don't see reality. I've often said that if Republicans or conservatives and liberals were all at Disney World together, you would find us on Main Street in Adventureland and Tomorrowland. You would have to go to Fantasyland and Tomorrowland to find the liberals. They would never even come on Main Street. They just went right by that one.
I have a question for you. You know, obviously you've been sharing truth for a long time, and a lot of times media isn't willing to put that truth out. But it seems like in that interview that you did with GBN is that that there was a freedom that you felt to share information that maybe you've never shared before. What happened to make you feel like you could do that at that point?
Two things. One, again, God. You know, I just felt in his hands. And two, Jack Smith's error. He made the error. Subpoena power was there. I had a valid reason to bring up the illegitimacy of the resident in the White House, to bring in 1871, to bring in about Space Force, the military, Edward Snowden, and be able to tell them. And if you think that the military doesn't have this, I mean, what I probably will eventually be able to say in more detail, if you think Trump had not been aware of all of this even before he ran in 2016, then you have not paid attention to anything that the Democrats have done or tried to do to him and how it rolls off of him. Is there any other president that looks just as young today?
No.
Maybe
as
better.
when-
Yep.
Yes, because he lost some weight.
Yep.
He's just like, this looks fresh and,
He
and like I don't know.
It's like water off a duck's back. The things that seem to happen to
Exactly.
him, truly, it just doesn't stick. It just rolls right off. It's amazing.
Exactly. Well, and he is so good at baiting them.
Yes.
And they don't even realize it. I was at the inauguration, and the Sunday after, I did a panel radio show, and the lovely Jennifer Rubin, the never Trumper from the Washington Post, was also on the panel. And I said, you know what? You guys, you don't listen to him. And what they said to me was they had no time because they had to get a story out. I said, the game is not who goes viral first. It's really who's going to give the information. But at that point, I realized they didn't care about it.
Yeah.
They absolutely did not care. They don't even think about their audience.
Well, let's dive into these things one by one because
Okay.
I got a list here, and I'm just going to keep sitting here trying to just squeeze juice out of your head like it's like I'm making lemonade until you just like turn
Okay.
off your computer and run away.
All right.
Let's talk about Jack Smith a little bit because you bring that up in that interview. What do people watching need to know about his misstep, and what advantage is that for President Trump of with the subpoena power of what's happening there? Let's go into that one specifically, then maybe move on to Georgia.
Okay, one thing to know about Jack Smith is that he is evil. Look at the face. Evil personified. And you're waiting for the spit to come out of his mouth when you see this. And he has gone after to try to ruin people. The governor of Maryland, I believe it was. I could have the state wrong. And absolutely ruined his career, and yet the Supreme Court overruled everything about him. He is one of those people that makes things up. It's no different than Robert Mueller and having those 5 men put in prison for 30 odd years, and he knew they weren't guilty. You know, when we have those kind of people in our judicial system and have that power, it makes it very, very frightening, which is why Donald Trump is always saying, I'm letting them, this is not verbatim, but I'm letting them go after me to protect you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Abraham Lincoln said one time to a newspaper columnist, he said, I would never have a man on my cabinet with a bad face. And they said, well, how could you hold somebody accountable for that? And he goes, every man over the age of 40 is responsible for his face. Yeah. And it's in a book by Dale Carnegie. It's Dale Carnegie talking about in a book called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. But it's kind of like the How to Win Friends, Influence People. But he's talking about the point is like the bitterness and vengefulness and things when you base your life on those kind of principles that are inside, eventually they inevitably manifest on the outside, and you see that with a lot of these deep state characters, and you juxtapose that against President Trump. We were just with Don Jr. and Kimberly in Vegas. Did interviews with them, and we've had Eric Trump several times. We've done personal interviews with him at ReAwaken America events, and those guys, they have a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, but carry a ton of joy, and they both laugh easily. They both love to laugh. When you're talking beforehand, they are joking around. It's sports. It's this. It's they can give each other a hard time, and there's a lot of joy around them, and that comes from their father. They credit him with that. No matter what's going on, he can be tough, but there's a joy and a lightness that you just don't see on the faces of these John Bolton characters and these what you see on the left.
No, you don't. Now, John Bolton, I know him rather well, and actually a very good friend of mine has been his right arm for 30 years or more. He's just a neocon, an unhappy neocon who cannot accept that he's past his sell-by date, that how he thinks is not, it's how he thinks, but not in response to what he sees or hears. Where Donald Trump does things in response to what he sees and hears. Another way of saying it is that when he launched his campaign in 2016, he had his finger on the pulse. He was saying things that we were thinking, but weren't allowed to say or would be condemned to say.
Yes.
And when I listen to a Chris Christie, criticizing him.
Just vengeful.
And
Just vengeful.
It is vengeful, but also what's going on in his heart. It can't be good. In fact,
it's not attractive. Even you can see that though, like even, the debates, like people just didn't like him. I mean, people didn't like his responses. They booed a lot when he was talking. I mean, they feel that hate and anger coming off of him, and they just reject it.
It doesn't connect in the way that President Trump does, in the way that there's endless stories of cab drivers and construction workers and people like this, that he would go to a building and break away from the manager of the building and go talk to the people that are putting in the heating, air conditioning. And he relates to, I don't know how he does, because it's odd. Not a lot of billionaires that showed up in a limo can relate to the guy pouring concrete.
Still wearing a suit.
And he doesn't fake it like you see a lot of, like, oh, I'm talking to construction workers. I'll take off the jacket and lose the tie, so I'll blend in with it. He still wears his suit. He doesn't fake like Hillary Clinton. And I always have hot sauce in my purse, based on who she's talking to. These kind of just he's always him, but somehow he connects with the guy driving the bulldozer.
Well, as his kids would say, he's basically a blue-collar billionaire. And he's one that grew up with wealth, but doesn't take it for granted. And it doesn't define him, because he's been with regular people.
Yes.
Just good old regular people. And he's a regular person. I feel terrible for him in that he was a media darling for 35 years. I lived in New York when he and Ivana came to be, and the social darlings. And then to suddenly, one day, come down an escalator and have the Huffington Post go, we're going to put this in the entertainment section. And then to have these people turn on him I know that is one thing that really stuck a knife in him, because he is really a good-natured person. And his values are loyalty, faithfulness, and to have that happen, that did not, it still hasn't. It's why it's always fake news, fake news, fake news. They're never going to give me credit. They're never going to say this, all the fake news back there, do you think they'll cover this?
Right.
Are they going to show all the people? No. And he has every right to be upset about it, because he's been betrayed.
He has.
So we kind of derailed you a little bit. Let's go back to Jack Smith, because we got sidetracked by his face. But let's talk about subpoena power and why. There's a funny line in the movie Rocky, where Rocky's kind of getting punched and beaten up, and like his trainer, his brother-in-law would be like, "Hey, he's losing." He's like, "He's not losing. He's got him right where he wants him," kind of thing. He's wearing him out. It's like it looks like a loss, but it's really a win. Talk about how can a guy get indicted this many times, so many states, and actually do better?
Yeah.
And it looks like a loss, but it's really a win. And I guess the subpoena power is where that kind of becomes a judo move there.
All right. One thing that we can always count on with the liberals trying to get him is that ultimately they always fail. And I have known Nancy Pelosi for 40 odd years, maybe more. And Nancy and I worked together to bring the 1984 Democrat National Convention to San Francisco. At that time, even in that liberal city, we Republicans and the Democrats worked so well together. And I used to consider Nancy and Dianne Feinstein as conservative Democrats because they cared about national security, they cared about economic issues, and social issues were the really big thing. I worked on Nancy's first congressional campaign after Sarah Burton died, and she decided that she was going to run. I worked on Dianne Feinstein's mayoral recall campaign because she carried a gun then.
Wow.
She was
It's a different planet.
Exactly.
What happened?
Exactly. Well, honestly, I don't know. I really don't know. And I must admit, Marsha Blackburn had invited me to one of the congressional and Senate dinners at the Library of Congress to hear a talk. And I couldn't resist. There was a chair open next to Nancy, and I sat down there and I started talking to her and telling her what I was doing. Just because as she went to one extreme, I wanted her to realize we were not in sync. I hadn't really changed much. I mean, I voted for Richard Nixon. I mean, I've always voted federally Republican. Yes, I lived in San Francisco for 20 odd years. At that point, of course, we put in people who were going to support the community. That's why you move to a state, or that's why you live in a state. They are creating the lifestyle for you. And I asked her, I said, I never knew that you would go so far to the left. But at this point, the one thing I always say is I can count on her to fail. Even while we were trying to bring the Democrat National Committee, the convention, to San Francisco, she was like a little kid. She was so scared in her own boots. In fact, Cokie Roberts' mother was holding her hand and really guiding her through every bit of it.
Wow.
And that's the Nancy Pelosi that I know. And I kept saying, okay, try to impeach him. Great, you're going to fail. Keep on going for it. Keep on saying what you're saying. But when have you really succeeded? And one other thing, I know you asked me about Jack Straw, and I've gone off on Nancy Pelosi, but one of the other things to understand about her rise, it was because she was a fabulous fundraiser. And at that point in politics, it was who could raise the most money. And that is really what elevated her. But she did nothing for women in the Democrat Party whatsoever. And there's no succession plan. Is there any other woman in Congress that has even been taken under her wing? No. And even when she gave that 60-minute interview and she just brushed off the posse, the whatever they were called, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yep.
Yeah. You know, she couldn't even be gracious about that. And so the more she aged, the more her true nature came out, but the failures, because now she wasn't the biggest fundraiser, and that wasn't necessarily the most powerful criteria to continue to moving up. So that, I think, is a tragic situation, but they're part of why. 30 years they're saying, oh, The wage inequity. Yeah, there's a wage inequity, and why haven't you done anything about it? But Congressman George Holding, former, once explained to me, they don't solve these things because then they have nothing to campaign on.
Sure.
And that's it. But okay,
sense.
back
It's
to
like
Jack
Republicans
Straw.
with pro-life. You know, it's the same thing.
Yeah. Jack Straw
But
is,
Jack
is
Smith?
another one. I think he was put in there because he's going to be reversed in every way. I mean, he's already suffered with Representative Perry wanting to get 2,000 of his text messages and calls because he's close to Donald Trump. And the judge at the appellate level kicked it back. It's gone back to the district level. And so I really caution people to look at those things because it won't be a lot of signs, but it will be significant signs, like the Georgia teacher that was fired because she read a book about a person being purple, meaning transgender, but she got fired. When has a teacher been fired on that side of things? And then the art teacher in Illinois, I don't know why they didn't read his, whatever he is, he's like a he, she, that why didn't they read all his social media before they hired him? He had been posting, I'm manic depressive, you know, I go up and down, I think of cruel things, and they got rid of him. So it's those little signs that we have to watch for, and that was why I was so excited about Jack Straw giving Donald Trump subpoena power, because no other indictment had done that at that point. But you had to charge him criminally for him to have his due process. And Jack Smith ultimately mentioned that he made a mistake.
Most architects and engineers know nothing about the third worst structural failure in modern history. This does not happen by office fires.
The collapse of World Trade Center 7 was primarily due to fire.
Not one of them has ever collapsed, not even these after 9/11. What buildings have come down like this? Controlled demolition.
We did not find any evidence that explosives were used.
You heard explosions. Big explosion.
Just seen a big flash.
Like a boom.
What's what it is?
We have more information of bombs, like an explosion.
Office fires don't melt steel. So what's going on here? Is there enough to warrant an investigation?
Have you ever wondered about ancient civilizations or the moon landing, chemtrails, the Nephilim, demons? Those are all things that fascinate me. Decided to use our platform of the Flyover Conservative podcast and create a new show called Conspiracy Conversations. Every Saturday morning, we get together with some of the brightest minds in the world that have spent thousands of hours on a topic, churning through the research, looking at things. They've traveled, they've been to the locations, they're looking for the truth because they're as curious as you and I are about what's true. What is really true about our past, where we came from, where we are, and where we're going? We don't bring on guests to iron out their wrinkles and find out the things that we disagree on. No more than I go to the grocery store and try to put everything in the whole store in my cart. I just try to walk out with better ideas than I had when I walked in. If you got something inside you that's like, what about that? I don't even know if I agree, but I would like to hear them out. If you have an open mind and a curious heart, we've got a show for you every Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, conspiracyconversations.com.
Hello, Flyover family. Join me every Wednesday for the Prophetic Report at 11:11 Central. You can find it on Rumble. You can find it on the Flyover app. We have such an incredible time of hearing from all of these different prophetic voices like Robin Bullock, Julie Green, Barry Wunsch, Amanda Grace, and Hank Kuhneman.
Every week, it's either 5 or 6 different prophets that are speaking, and what's interesting is God is speaking through them, and all of these voices come together like puzzle pieces. It is so exciting to hear what the Lord is saying. We're hearing from medical, we're hearing from military intelligence, we're hearing from the financial world, we're hearing from mainstream media, but the most important is, what is God saying? He has not fallen off the throne. He's not nervous. He's not chewing his nails. He is in control. He has plans to prosper us and not to harm us. What a great time to be alive, and I'm so excited for you to join me every Wednesday at 11:11.
So what are the things we need to be looking for in these cases? Specifically Georgia seems to be the big one that they're moving forward the most aggressively, and seems to be the one with the most opportunity for things to actually get into a courtroom.
Exactly. And a story just broke about Fannie Willis and Kemp and quite a few other people actually being that they should be charged RICO charges.
Wow.
That they have been part of, and maybe you can find this article on it, and I'll send it to you, Colton. I've got the article. But the exciting thing about Georgia for me is that Trump, his lawyers, will have a platform to bring forth to the jury anything that they want the public to know. So that's why I'm so excited about it.
Because like the guy even said, not to interrupt you, but one of his big points there was, hey,
60
you hear
cases.
This, like 60 cases have come and they've all been thrown. There is nothing to see here. Like that gets thrown around a lot. And
Always.
I like the way you kind of sliced and diced that.
Yeah, only 3, 2 won, 1 lost. That was so good. 57 that just didn't have. I mean, that was like really, really well done.
Oh, well, thank you. I felt it's because people don't understand what standing is.
Mm-hmm.
And I know what standing is because when we were filing our lawsuit to protect the 9 million expats about a new tax law that was going through, we actually had to find plaintiffs that would have standing. Mm-hmm. And in fact, that could show the damage that was happening. And we had 10 plaintiffs that were there, and we had to go through the district level and the appellate level because our goal was to get to the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court threw it out because they claimed we didn't have standing. So standing is a very personal thing.
It's very important. Me. Yes, for sure.
So talk about...
Especially...
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, especially when over 6,415 expat Americans had to give up their citizenship. They had to renounce their citizenship. You're telling me that's not standing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because of this tax law that was impacting expats. Yeah. So I do.
Yeah.
Executive Order 13848.
That went through September 12th, 2018 by President
September
Trump.
12th, 2018. So let's dig into that just a little bit for people that are not familiar with that.
Okay, here's the important thing to understand. The District of Columbia is in essence, a separate country unto themselves. Mm-hmm. They are considered to be on foreign soil. Therefore, anyone in Congress, in the agencies, whether they live or work in D.C., are considered to be working on foreign soil. Okay. Now, that is no different than the Vatican City is not part of Italy. It is in Italy or surrounded by Italian land, but Vatican City is separate. It all started back in 1066 with William the Conqueror who then told the bankers in the City of London that they would be a separate entity. And in fact, if the king or the queen wants to go into the City of London, because there is the Lord Mayor in charge of the City of London, they have to ask permission.
Okay.
And the banking control started way back then, when and William the Conqueror gave them a creed. Sorry, my phone rang, and that really threw me off because it never rings.
You're like, who's calling me?
I'm so glad you can edit this. Yes, Cody. Yes. There you go. Goodness,
okay?
I'm really glad you can edit things. So it started then, and the Romans had built a wall around this 1 mile square, and it has always remained independent foreign soil. So what happened with 1871 is that the French loaned the U.S. an enormous amount of money to get through our Civil War. And so then the Brits came back into play, the bankers. Mm-hmm. They came back into play and said, we'll get you out of debt with France, but what we need to do is create a corporation where the City of London is in charge of money around the world. The U.S. would be the military component, and the Vatican would be the bank. And that is how the three came together. And they called it the U.S. Crown Corporation. And while we had taxation with no representation, and then we succeeded in fighting that, we then got right back into it. And a huge portion of the taxes we pay for 151 years has really been going to the bankers, to the City of London. Yep, that's it. United States Crown Corporation.
Wow.
So when you were saying, when President Trump was with Queen Elizabeth, and they, on that whole clip that we played earlier, he was actually saying something to her about that. Is that right, through his actions?
No, he had already told her.
Okay.
And so my interpretation is that he needed to let us know back home that he told her.
Okay.
So they had worked it out for her to let him know when he could go. I mean, it's so obvious if you just look at this clip. This is not someone that took off ignoring the Queen.
No.
He was given permission by the Queen to go ahead and tell us that she knows bankruptcy, dissolution, it will be in the cards.
Wow.
And you've talked about, too, in that interview, the Vatican and the Pope, and him not looking very happy. Can you talk about that as well? What happened at that point?
Well, if you look at the picture of the Pope and Angela Merkel when she's visiting, he's just as happy as can be.
Interesting.
Have you ever seen Trump look happier? Have you ever?
It's the opposite.
Ever. And have you ever seen the Pope look more upset? Talk about faces again. Is that not the epitome of evil that is coming out?
Yes.
Yeah, for those of you that are just listening on Apple or Spotify, these other that are audio only, you need to come and just check this picture out, because it's like if you had some kids that are like 4 and 5 years old, and one of them just took the other kid's ice cream. you know, and like he's like, I got the ice cream. The other one's like, that was my ice cream. I'm so sad. It's like I've never seen two different expressions in the same photo.
Well, and it was the Pope that got the information before the Queen.
Wow.
And
okay.
So the Queen knew. It wasn't that she didn't know this was coming, but that trip, let's even back up. His first stop was Saudi Arabia. Oh yeah, see, look how happy. He doesn't look like the epitome of evil when he's with Angela Merkel. No, not at all.
Big difference.
Huge.
Yeah.
Oh,
huge.
sad. So this is the 2018. He 2018. He made a kind of a world tour, you know,
Right.
and made stops at critical places and disseminated critical information and established a level of authority in certain relationships. Is that kind of accurate?
That's
fair,
very
safe
accurate.
to say. Okay.
Yes, it's safe to say. And he stopped in Saudi Arabia. The fact that they gave him the sword is very significant because it's only the king who is supposed to have the sword. But human and child trafficking was really key. And that really bothered Trump. Think about when he left. Right after that, that king wasn't king anymore. And 200 plus royals were suddenly arrested, and the jail of the Ritz-Carlton in Riyadh. I mean, that's not such a bad jail cell, but they were all arrested. The king was no longer the king and had to pay $6 billion in fines because Trump delivered a treasure trove of human and child trafficking that these people had been part of.
Wow.
And that was the first part. I believe when he left Saudi Arabia, he went to Israel because that's when he wanted to start the conversations for the Abraham Accords.
Okay. And the capital.
He
and
also,
all these things.
yeah, he had, I think it was a NATO meeting. In between, he went to the Pope. He had to go to Brussels. And then it wasn't until 2019 that he really sat down with the Queen. But once again, we're talking about what are the signs? What are the little things that we need to pay attention to? And I frankly don't believe in saying things to give people hope. What I would prefer to say is that we need to all give up our expectations and the script that is in our own minds of how we are expecting this to unfold. Look, we were all told that on January 20th, 2021, hey, we're going to be arrests and all of it. And, you know, it's like, oh, great, justice is going to be served. Oh, it didn't happen. And therefore, then I'm guilty of this myself. I thought 2022, we were going to expose the fraud. So I realized, I sat myself down one day and I said, you know what? I can't go through this hopium anymore. I can't. Because what I'm doing to myself is taking the lifeblood out of me, because then I get so depressed because I imagined it happening because so-and-so said this and so-and-so said that. And instead, I started to pray from gratitude, because gratitude is the highest spiritual form. It's much different than thankfulness. It really is the ability to appreciate everything. And within that, I started thinking and I started telling people, why are we getting upset because some podcaster said this and it didn't happen? What we need to do is we need to feel gratitude for each and every person we listen to, because they did some research. They put their thinking cap on, and they are using their heart and their motivation to share information with us in the best way that they can. And so if we can let go of that script, oh, believe me, I would just love to see the military round them up.
Of course.
I had such great script going on in my head.
Yes.
That I just had to say, in God's time, and I need to stop thinking about it, but I need to focus on everything I'm listening to, and I need to be grateful that those people have took their time to pass that information on to me. And it's quite a few people, I've been pretty insistent with them about moving that way, and it's helped them get over their hopium. We don't need to set ourselves up to then come crashing down because life didn't happen the way we thought it was supposed to happen. That is exactly how the liberals think. And we don't want to be in that case because we have a strategic reasoning ability that we use. We look at reality that they don't. And so focus on reality, but not on how you expect it to be, because it will never be that way.
Oh, that's a great
And God
point.
expects us to do the footwork. And if we don't do the footwork, then it's not going to happen. And it will always happen in God's time. Now, also with human nature, things can be going along smoothly, and then something unanticipated puts a wrench in it. Or as some people say, Murphy's Law.
Sure.
Whatever could possibly go wrong will go wrong. But that's part of life. And Trump is prepared for that. I think he's got one of the greatest strategic, intuitive minds I've ever seen, because it is our intuition that pulls everything together and gives us that wisdom to be able to anticipate or to be alert to different things.
So as we're piecing these things together, when you look at this trip, now you're looking at it through the lens of somebody with behavioral psychology. So you're seeing people's movements and how they interact with one another, tiers of leadership. You taught leadership courses to the top business minds in the world for years at the highest levels. So you have that component of your mind. And then you also have the Stanford political psychology going on. So these are all political leadership tiers of things happening. Break this down for just the regular person that says, okay, I see these. There's the sword ceremony in Saudi Arabia. He went on to Russia, and I remember there was the soccer ball with Putin.
Yep.
Exactly. The ball's in your court.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there it is there on the
ball's in
screen.
your court.
Yep.
They're meeting in Helsinki in 2018.
And remember how the media went crazy, negative about that? And, oh, Russia. They thought it continued to reinforce the Russia. And then, of course, there's a story that there was a USB stick inside the ball. There wasn't. Again, optics. Putin is saying the ball's in your court. It was one more leader falling in with Trump's plan, because it is bigger than just for the United States. The evil doesn't only exist in the U.S. The evil and the corrupt politicians and the corrupt people behind those politicians exist around the globe. And Trump is the leader of cleaning up the corrupt debris.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Well, it's like the way the kids behave in school, even if they don't like a certain teacher, but she kind of knows how to keep everybody in line. Like they're not shooting spit wads in class.
And they actually feel more secure when the teacher's actually strict and stern, then they do somebody that's like, oh, you can do whatever you want.
Or some substitute teacher that doesn't
Yeah,
have
you're like,
control, and they're
oh,
like, oh,
yeah.
we don't have to listen
Yeah.
today. It's chaos for everybody.
Yep.
And it seems like President Trump on a global scale sort of brought that alpha leader, mode. There's the one clip, I forget what meeting they're walking into and who the guy was, but they're all together, and he just kind of like comes in, like pushes the guy out of the way and like fixes his jacket, like Trump just sort of like was the senior leader in every class around a bunch of sophomores.
True.
I think it was maybe a G20 meeting,
Yes.
and it was he's sitting down, and he's got his arms crossed, and you've got Angela Merkel with her hands on the table leaning forward, and you've got a couple of the other leaders, and you had Trudeau and I think Macron, supposedly, the media said, caught them making fun of Trump. But all you have to do is think that he's sitting there with his arms crossed, and they're all trying to convince him of something, and he's obviously just letting them go.
Yeah, he's the boss.
Go, there it is.
I refuse.
There it is. I mean, and there's Bolton. And here's the other interesting thing is the Japanese Prime Minister, look at his facial expression, because he also has his arms crossed, and he's not in the least bit impressed with what the others are trying to say to Trump either. But I love that Angela, supposedly Hitler's granddaughter, is trying to convince him of something, and he's not going to have any of it because he knows. He knows, but he knows also because he had the military behind him before he came down that escalator. He was recruited. I remember in the early days when people would say, I think God sent Trump. I think God sent Trump. And
are you having a hard time sleeping at night thinking, what am I going to do about my finances?
Times are really changing. They're changing fast. Let me give you a quick example of how. In 1920, if you had a $20 bill and 1 ounce of gold, you could go into any men's clothing store and buy an entire suit. You could buy the jacket, the shirt, the belt, shoes, the whole bit. Today, that $20 bill, what's it going to get you?
Not much.
Maybe the socks, maybe a handkerchief, but the 1 ounce of gold could still buy you the entire suit at any men's store in America. That's the difference. That's what inflation does to your dollar. It's a deflating dollar caused by inflation. Now today, that's happening faster than ever. You need somebody that you trust that can help get you out of a fake currency and into something that's going to keep you safe.
And we know a guy that has 2 PhDs by the name of Dr. Kirk Elliott. We have known him for over 25 years, and he's someone we completely trust.
You need somebody that you can get a hold of, somebody that's going to be there for you to get back out of it, and then maybe back into the stock market, maybe back into something else when things settle down. But right now is not that time. You need somebody that you trust and somebody you can call and make those worries go away.
That's exactly right. So you can go to flyovergold.com, fill out your information for a free consultation, or you can call 720-605-3900. Do it today.
You'll be glad you did.
we are driven by our intuition and our bodily responses. Even as simple as if we're at a cocktail party and we're holding a glass out in front of us, it's because we don't want someone to infringe upon our energy space, or we're setting our boundaries. And sometimes you can walk into a room and you can feel someone's negative energy. Or when I was saying, look at Jack Straw's face, that meanness, we have a physical reaction to it. You know, it might do a flip in our stomach, or we might make a terrible face back like, oh, that's so disgusting, or whatever. Our intuition and our physical responses are like a car. Our strategic reasoning is like the driver. The driver gets in. The driver doesn't know which direction, has to make those decisions, has to check things out, has to turn the signals on or put it in gear or decide not to go and drive in the rain, whatever. And so when people say, I gave them hope, I counter that with, all I did was say what you intuitively, which for me is logic scrambled up. That's all into, you're taking in everything. You don't exactly know how it's gotten sorted out, and frankly, it doesn't matter. So if I had to leave people with anything, it would be trust yourselves better. Because all I did was reconfirm what you suspected. And yes, great. I'm glad I could put that gold sticker on it, but don't discount your own sense of things, your own decision making. And also don't discount that Satan tries to come in and screw it up.
That's really good.
And you have to, again, when Satan comes in, you will have a physical response to it. And when you start doubting yourself, then ask yourself, am I doubting myself because I'm trying to find the holes in my thinking? Or am I doubting myself because this idea popped in my head? If it popped in your head, pop it out. Pop it out.
That is so good. Since you're already kind of talking a little bit about it, you know that our slogan here at Flyover Conservatives is wake up, speak up, and show up. What are some ways that you would recommend maybe the Flyover family that they could speak up and show up in their own family, in their own community to make a difference, you know, in this country? Because I believe that, you know, God's putting together this puzzle and we're all a piece of a puzzle. We were born for such a time as this, that it wasn't an accident that we're born now instead of 1,000 years ago or 100 years from now. We are alive right now. And so what are some things that you would recommend that people could possibly do to bring their piece of the puzzle to this puzzle that God's putting together?
Okay, this is another part of what I think has been Trump's plan and why he went fraud, 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 because it made people realize we were expecting the politicians to take care of us, but we are a government of we the people. Whatever you can do to help make someone else's life better, to open their eyes, just start with that. I don't have a lot of time on my hands between my DOD job and I still have private clients, and I don't get to work out the way I used to. So I've just kind of relinquished that. But a woman saw me walking my dog in the park, and she's a single mom, and I had given my number. I too, at a time in my life, had been a single mother. And she called me and asked that she had an opportunity to go out on a Saturday night, and could she have her 2 boys spend the night in my house?
Oh, wow.
And I said, sure. So then I found out that these 2 boys had never really been out of our neighborhood. So for Halloween, I took them to Covent Garden to the Transport Museum. They hadn't even been 25 minutes on a bus to central London.
Wow.
Now, their skin color was as midnight could be, and mine wasn't as midnight could be. And people were looking at us. And so then I just started putting my arms around them, and we started having so much fun. And lo and behold, the best that I can do is they come over and they spend the night. I take them to the West End because one of my neighbors was in Mary Poppins. And so then they got to, I mean, for me to expose them to the world.
Yep.
The little one is already a fantastic artist, and he had never been to an art museum. So that is what I can do on a very regular basis. And it can be as simple as that, but I'm telling you, I love these kids, and they've opened my eyes to things, in particular of how many people aren't exposed to the world in general. And so speaking the truth, doing good deeds, getting involved in your local communities. As General Flynn says, it's local, local, local. Mm-hmm. The RNC did not want to allow for precinct captain training for all of the different state and county and local groups. So one person decided to develop the course, and then he started encouraging people to go to the regional meetings or the local county meetings and to volunteer to be a precinct captain. And that changed their lives.
Yes.
When you have someone going to the school board meetings, well, think about it this way. I never thought I was going to make a difference being picked up at 6 a.m, having not slept and doing my usual, because I know how Stephen can be negative, and so I was all prepared for it. I didn't know all that was going to happen. And so if you don't put it out, then you don't get anything back. But you have to put it out there. And that's the best you can do.
Yes. And we all have something to give. It's free to walk through a checkout line and to be nicer to the person than they are to you, and to leave them a little more encouraged. And just, I mean, I'm not saying being sappy, just like smile.
Right.
Thank you. I appreciate you helping me. Just be nice.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And even you starting that conversation with the lady in the park, or having that conversation with the lady in the park, where some people would just walk by and never say anything. You developed a relationship where now is making a difference in her life and her children's lives. I mean, it's incredible.
All I did was give her my phone number. And again, she just called me and asked, would I let them, because she had this opportunity. I said, send them over. Wow. I said, I'll keep them all day Sunday as well. We'll go do something. Fine, go out, have a good time. I understand you need a moment of freedom. Go for it. What made her ask me? I don't know, but I'm glad she did. It's changed my life. It's changed. And while my dog had fathered 5 puppies, and 2 of them for 2 weeks ended up with me, and she ended up taking in 2 of her sister's kids.
Oh, wow.
And as I said, the rooftop of our building, which is more than a long, long, long city block, I said, bring them over. Let them play with the puppies. Let them play with the dogs. The weather's nice, and no one uses our roof. So come on over. So we had 5 days of really incredible weather. And every day they were all over here, all having a good time. And she didn't have to take them to the park.
Wow.
And she didn't have to haul them in. She didn't have to worry about things, And that actually brought a lot of pleasure to me. And it then transferred to some of my neighbors, because they were bringing their little kids up because the weather was so nice. And everyone left very, very happy and making new friends and having a sense of freedom and safety. And I feel good about that.
Yeah.
Even as I'm telling you this,
Yeah.
it warmed my heart that they kept coming over. And that was, I always say, the best you can do. What is not the right, not the wrong, but the best thing that I could do at that moment was also, because she now inherited her sister's kids,
Yeah.
give her a break and give her the space to sit with me and have a glass of wine while the kids could run free and no one needed to look after them at all
That's incredible.
because the space was safe. So that's what I say. This fraud happened to give us a good kick in the bottom, to make us realize that no, we cannot depend on our politicians to make our life okay. We make life okay. We make life, and we have to make our voice heard.
Yep.
Yeah. Will Rogers said politics is way too important to leave up to the politicians.
Yeah. True.
Absolutely.
It's up to all of us. At the end of the day, we're the ones that are gonna bear the brunt of a lot of those decisions. And so I think that is important, that we get active at the lowest rung of the ladder. Get engaged.
That is for sure.
Absolutely. You also asked what other signs. Senator Ron Johnson has really become a champion at exposing things. But when Donald Trump was first elected, he gave an interview because he's been a very successful business person. He said, well, when you come to DC, politics is very different, and you have to learn the rules of the game and how to play it. And if anyone's gone through a transformation, Ron Johnson. And so again,
that's a good
pick
point.
Certain people to follow what they're doing. Again, don't make assumptions. Don't make all sorts of interpretations. I listened to one podcast of some people in Australia, and their interpretation of me and what I said, and it was like, no, just listen to what I said. Don't impugn, don't interpret, don't assume. We tend to do that, but that's why I say, if we hold back from expectations, if we look at what the signs are, God's always sending messengers to us.
Yep.
We don't have to have all the answers at every moment, but we can store it away because it will eventually come together.
Ah, that is so good. Again, Flyover family, follow Dr. Jan by going to drjan.substack.com.
Yes.
We've run out of time, but this article is absolutely amazing that you wrote and you put on your Substack in August, but why Donald Trump has the perfect presidential temperament. Y'all have to read this. It's great information. Also, follow Dr. Jan on True Social at Real Dr. Jan and Twitter at biz_shrink. So two more places to be able to follow her. Dr. Jan, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for everything that you're doing to help to get this information out, but also having such a strong foundation in who you are.
For speaking up and showing up everywhere that God has put you, and growing where you're planted.
And
it's
your
amazing.
faith is contagious. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
This was just really a blessing for me to be with you. Your energy is so pure, and I just love how you think and what you do and how you're reaching people. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jan. We'll see you next time.
All right, let's get our stuff together here. Hi, I'm David Whited. If we could skip the hi, my name's David part, because that's where I kind of tend to derail. Hi. But I did good. See, look. First thing it says. Say your name. Say your name, David White. Have you been wondering what to do with the spare time you have on Saturday mornings? Have I got a way for you to fill that time? Not cleaning your garage, folding your laundry, or doing something with yourself. Filling your head with worthless information about what may or may not have happened 5,000 years ago. Have you ever wondered about ancient civilizations or about chemtrails in the sky? Or have you ever had a friend at school talk to you about friend at school? Some days when you're sitting there with your lunch pail, you're talking to your friends at school, they bring up your flat earth, and you think it's a flat earth. I don't know if your flat earth is flat or not. I don't know, alligators are angry because they got all those teeth and no toothbrush. And it's all true. And we talk about it every Saturday. We talk about Rubik's Cubes and stuff. We like to have conversations with people that have made documentaries, written books. Oh, this is terrible. I can feel myself hating watching this later. Okay, give me a swoosh. Let's do this thing for real this time. Have I got a show for you? Hang on, my eyes red now? You won't be able to tell in there. Peter can fix it. He can run it through a filter. Can he run it through the Brad Pitt filter and get rid of my red eyes? Oh, I'm probably doing the world a disservice.
Most architects and engineers know nothing about the third worst structural failure in modern history. This does not happen by office fires.
The collapse of World Trade Center 7 was primarily due to fire.
Not one of them has ever collapsed, not even these after 9/11. What buildings have come down like this? Controlled demolition.
We did not find any evidence that explosives were used.
You heard explosions. Big explosion.
Just seen a big flash.
Like a boom.
What's on the news?
We have more information of bombs, like an explosion.
Office fires don't melt steel. So what's going on here? Is there enough to warrant an investigation?
You know what time it is. It's time for an economic update with Dr. Kirk Elliott. Yay!
Yay.
Welcome.
Oh, it's so good to be with you again. It always is. I love it.
We do too.
We have a ton of fun because here's one thing we do. I say we. I basically sit here and listen to you. But you make talking about economics fun and interesting. And, you're cool. We got the jingle coming in. I know sometimes people are like, it's silly. You know what? When you do shows every day on sex trafficking and this and something going on, it's like, even the things in the economy can be overwhelming. It's like, I don't want everything getting fixed just to be something that happens somewhere down the road. It's like, we can kind of choose our attitude in the middle of these things. And it's like, man, the world can be going crazy, but your world doesn't have to be.
That's right.
And while we do spend a lot of time, we have a lot of 12-hour days. I know you work, kind of similar work ethic. You're always, if I get a text message from you sometimes it's 4 or 5 in the morning, you're up cranking. But we don't have to just put everything else off in the future to enjoy the process and be fun. We can put a lot of effort into making a difference, saving the world, doing the best part that you can, making things. But you know what? This is still a day the Lord's made, and we can rejoice and we can be glad in it. And whatever crazy stuff you're going to throw at us with the economy today is great, but we can still rejoice and be glad in it. And God always makes a way, always has a plan. We can work through this. And I love that you bring that to the table. You're not, I always tell people, he ain't your grandpa's PhD.
No, he's much cooler.
Much cooler.
Much cooler, I hope. I hope. Because most of the PhD professors I've known, they're so boring.
No kidding.
I don't want to be boring.
No.
I don't want to be boring. But one thing that's never boring is the world that we're living in. There's always something to talk about, right? And most people get so scared about it. It's just so I was watching TV earlier. It's just this interview. And Biden was speaking in East Palestine Illinois, right? So, or Ohio. So, and they were asking him, why he hasn't been there, or giving any support or help. And he fumbles around with an answer like he does. And it's like, well, I'm kind of busy. I'm going to Iran and I'm going to this place and that place. And it's like, what? You actually just said that you're too busy for your own people and you were bragging about it? How horrible, dumb thing to say. But he said other dumb things too, just total gaslighting about the economy and the number of jobs that they're creating. When in the news cycle, you all are doing news every single day, right? So if you were to make a mistake and you have to recant that, a few days later, nobody sees your revision story.
Nope.
They only see the first one, right? Yep. It's like nuts. Well, this is what they do. So these amazing economists, they give out these numbers, and they've been working on numbers like the quarterly gross domestic product or quarterly inflation numbers or unemployment numbers. And they give a number, and then 4 days later, it's like they revise it. It's like, couldn't you get it right the first time? Seriously, you've been working on this for 3 months.
You think it's intentional, potentially?
Of course it is. It's like, because how in the world could every single time they come out with a number, it's like, oh yeah, this is the right number, and it's always a few days later. It's like, what? Just get it right the first time. But they do that on purpose to make the economy look good, make it look robust, because that's the story that every news carrier covers, and nobody ever covers the revision, like ever. Like nobody knew that the unemployment numbers was revised down. Nobody knew that the GDP numbers were revised down. Nobody knew that their revised inflation numbers, a few days. It's like nobody ever looks at the revision, right?
Yeah.
So, and they have no qualms about saying whatever they want to say. Like Jean-Pierre, she said the other day that Biden has proven to be the toughest president in U.S. history on the border.
Gosh.
Like he's the most concerned with border. One of his first legislations he ever did was to toughen up things on the border, and he's been one of the toughest presidents on the southern border. And I'm like,
oh my gosh, how could they say that?
It's like
face?
And they just go on. They don't blink.
No accountability.
No, they don't even blink.
It's so many lies. I hate to say it, but the revisionist numbers, they are lies. The lies about the COVID vaccine, how it's so effective, and Jill Biden, poor thing, got COVID again. I bet she's gotten every booster under the sun.
I'm sure.
Right? It's like, how could you get COVID? Like you've gotten like probably 5 boosters. I don't even know how many there are, but yet. So here's where our real life living will tell us that the job numbers aren't as good as what they say.
Right.
So here's the thing. We've been talking about artificial intelligence for quite a bit and how it's going to be the wave of the future, right? And it's overtaking the whole planet, right? So you would think that these big tech companies and these tech giants would be hiring people hand over fist to handle the explosion that's coming their way, right? Well, it's not the case, right? So Amazon laid off 18,000 people already. They just laid off, they're announcing another 9,000. So that's 27,000 job cuts. Meta, 21,000 job cuts. Alphabet, that owns Google, 12,000 job cuts. Microsoft, 10,000 job cuts. Crypto.com, 500, which doesn't sound like much, but that's 20% of its workforce.
Wow.
Coinbase, the biggest cryptocurrency wallet, 2,000 jobs cut. Dell, 6,600 jobs. eBay, 500 jobs. Salesforce, 7,000 jobs. Twilio, 1,500 jobs cut. Twitter, 3,700. Lyft, 700. Stripe, 1,100. Shopify, 1,000. It's like, wait. I could keep going on, but we have a time limit on the show.
No kidding.
Right? It's like, so tell me, either Biden's economy stinks, which it does, and I would rather believe these companies that are laying people off rather than his phony numbers, right? Because this is real. So they're having to lay people off because the economy really does stink really, really bad. But the second factor that nobody's talking about is possibly these jobs are already being replaced by computers, right? By artificial intelligence, by software, right? So you've got that vicious, ugly combination of probably both, right? You've got jobs being replaced by computers and a bad economy. It's like really, really bad. So it got me thinking. And there was a couple news stories that I saw earlier this week that actually amplified this position. Every time throughout history, I don't care the civilization, I don't care if they're advanced or barely scraping by, civil unrest always follows economic chaos. Always. 100% of the time. Whether it's in Venezuela and they have 1,000,000% inflation, whether it's Argentina and they're always in a state of inflation, whether it's Weimar Republic Germany and riots and looting and people were being mugged for their suitcases rather than the money that was in it, Zimbabwe, Cyprus, Greece, France just a few months ago. I mean, that was big. The poor people in France, right? Socialist country with socialist people, right? It's like, we've overpaid in taxes our whole lives so you could take care of us during retirement. France says, sorry, we ran out of money. You're going to have to work a few more years before you can retire. It's like, what? But we're socialist in a socialist country. We shouldn't have to during retirement. This is the whole thing, right?
Right.
So what happens? And no disrespect to old people, but there's no other way I can describe this story. Old people, like 70s and their 80s. I'm not 70 yet, but I'm getting old too, right? But they're being knocked down in the streets by police because they're protesting. It's like, we want what we paid taxes for, right? Civil unrest. So in Washington, D.C., earlier this week, the news came out that Giant Foods, it's like a Kroger or Albertsons or Safeway, just a big grocery store chain.
Mm-hmm.
Look at that picture on the screen. You'd think that was like in Tampa right before the hurricane, right? It's not. That's just where they have name brand stuff. They have to take it off the shelves because everybody's stealing the name brand stuff.
Wow.
And so they're replacing it with like generic store brand things because maybe people won't steal that much. It's like, but okay, there's a higher order of things that's starting to happen here, right? So stealing is immoral and unethical, right? But yet stealing, if you're getting something to provide for your family so you can feed your kids, automatically becomes more moral than not feeding your kids, right? It's like this weird cycle where now that you can justify being immoral and unethical and all that by stealing, right? That's part of what happens when a society collapses after economic chaos. We're starting to see that, just like we saw in France and other places, right? But what's coming next, I think, is even bigger, and it just goes to the social erosion of what we're happening. Who's the congressman from Schiff, Congressman Schiff from California,
Adam Schiff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now they're pushing.
Schiff.
Yeah.
They're pushing to. This is probably going to go to the Supreme Court because states are wanting to take Trump off the ballots in certain states, and this will probably go on and on and on because of the January 6th thing, right? And I'm not speaking to the political nature of this. I'm speaking to the social erosion of the country, right? So his argument is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment says that came about after the Civil War, right? So this has been here for a long time, that anybody holding public office that's engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof can't hold public office. So they're saying that, in America, so much for the rule of law, you're actually guilty until proven innocent, right? Because, and don't take my word for it, take his words for it, because he said, the law doesn't require that you be convicted of insurrection. It just requires that you have engaged in these acts. And so it's like, okay, we just got to get him off the ballot. So imagine, this is the front runner by far in the GOP field, that they're just saying, we don't want him to run. So let's actually try to get this. And if this goes to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court decides the front runner for the GOP can't actually run, imagine the goofiness and the wild things that are going to be happening as civil unrest. I mean, I think it's going to be riots and protests and looting. And I'm just saying what happens because if this were to happen to somebody on the left, it would be the exact same thing, right? Yeah. It's just people have their people that they love and admire and they trust. And when they believe that they're falsely accused, they're going to riot about it. Mm-hmm. So you're going to probably see something like that happen, as well as an increase across the board, every single big city across the country. Increase in robberies, increase in burglaries, increase in shoplifting, increase in violent crime. All of that always follows economic collapse, right? So we're in an era right now where political instability and unrest is at its high point. Everybody's focusing on the negative. Everyone's focusing on how they hate everybody else rather than what they have in common with everybody else. And that's not a good mix for what's coming down the road when already you have economic unrest and economic fallout. Civil unrest always follows that, right? So I don't know. I know that you did because you're in tune to these things. But when Tucker Carlson interviewed President Trump on the big show that got like 500 million views or something crazy, he said, we've got a toxic combination in America. This was his ending statement. We've got passion that's coupled with hate. And that's a bad combination. That always leads to civil unrest, right? So we're entering this dark point in our economy where the economic imbalances are going to lead to civil unrest. But here's where there's light at the end of the tunnel, because like in everything, something goes too far. People wake up, they realize there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way, right? And I think that's what's going to happen in America is people are going to realize there's got to be a better way. There is a path to peace, not a path to hate, right? And in all of this, though, the reason I bring it up on an economic show is civil unrest always impacts the markets, right? Civil unrest is caused by the markets, but it also impacts the markets as well. Because people say, I don't really trust anything. We just got to hold back. Like, we're even afraid to go to the grocery store. I bet everybody else is too. I don't know if we want to invest in companies if nobody's going to buy anything, right? So you couple that with the depression that came during COVID 1.0, and they're already threatening COVID 2.0 and lockdowns and transportation and masks. And you have a couple of brave governors, like the governor of Mississippi, said, we're not going to comply with these mandates. We're not going to put our people through this a second time around. And Sarah Huckabee said the same thing in Arkansas. It's like, we're not going to actually apply these federal mandates in our states. Our states do have rights. And here's the thing that's going to come the second time around. The first time around, all small business owners, entrepreneurs, they spent their whole wad. They spent all their retirement savings just to get through it. So they don't have a buffer anymore. They don't have a buffer the second time around. So I think this could be devastating to small business in America, to entrepreneurs, to these little businesses. I think they might go away if we have COVID 2.0, where they lock people down. That's going to bring civil unrest, right? And but I think in a sense, this is what the government wants. They want everybody to be dependent upon the state to give them stimulus money to probably bring into effect after all this is done. I'm not being a prophet. I'm just connecting some dots here. Hey, take central bank digital currency. In fact, if you do, and you accept our proposal, we're going to attach that to universal basic income for everybody, right? There's got to have some dangling carrot out there, some shiny object that people are going to say, this sounds really good, let's do it. Because that always, people give up their freedoms in times of civil unrest, and I think that's what's coming. But we're waking up to that. But financially, the reason I bring that all up is because there are things that do really well during times of like that, and that's gold and silver. So we've been talking about it for a year as a good investment, but now we're actually talking about it as really a safe haven to just protect, be an insurance policy against everything else that's collapsing, because that's when it thrives.
Yeah, it's like getting your car into a garage during a hailstorm. You know, it's transferring out of one thing into another, so it's safe from the storm, and then you can come back out in the future and do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
Having something tangible is really the key, during this time. And that's an option for people too, Dr. Kirk, where they can, even if they buy silver or gold through you, the depository, they can have it shipped to their house. So it's tangible. They have it in their hand, or they can keep it in the depository, which we've had interviews on that as well. But there's multiple options that people can do when they do buy gold and silver.
Yeah. Take it at home or store it. If it's a non-IRA. Everyone's different. Some people don't want it at home because they might not live in a safe neighborhood. Some people don't trust anybody else with it, which I understand that too. But I do trust this depository. That's why we use them. So you can store it. But inside of an IRA, it has to be stored, because if you take distribution of it at home, It's a distribution out of your IRA, becomes a taxable event. So in an IRA, it just simply has to be stored. The point is there's so many options that we can pretty much cater to everybody's needs and dreams and desires to safeguard their assets. We just have to talk about it, go through it, and we'll strategize a plan for you to thrive rather than a plan for you to survive or worse.
And you guys have such a great internal structure to be able to help, and get through this. You have all the systems in place of walking them through that whole process.
Yeah, so to get a free consultation, something that doesn't cost you any money whatsoever to figure out what your options are, you go to flyovergold.com. When you scroll down to the bottom, there's a place you can fill out your information. When you do that, someone from Dr. Kirk's team will get a hold of you to set up that free consultation, answer all your questions, so then you can make intelligent decisions for yourself, for your family, or you can also call 720-605-3900. Again, 720-605-3900. Dr. Kirk, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for everything that you're doing. We really do appreciate you. Are you having a hard time sleeping at night, thinking, what am I going to do about my finances?
Times are really changing. They're changing fast. Let me give you a quick example of how. In 1920, if you had a $20 bill and 1 ounce of gold, you could go into any men's clothing store and buy an entire suit. You could buy the jacket, the shirt, the belt, shoes, the whole bit. Today, that $20 bill, what's it going to get you?
Not much.
Maybe the socks, maybe a handkerchief, but the 1 ounce of gold could still buy you the entire suit at any men's store in America. That's the difference. That's what inflation does to your dollar. It's a deflating dollar caused by inflation. Now today, that's happening faster than ever. You need somebody that you trust that can help get you out of a fake currency and into something that's going to keep you safe.
And we know a guy that has 2 PhDs by the name of Dr. Kirk Elliott. We have known him for over 25 years, and he's someone we completely trust.
You need somebody that you can get a hold of, somebody that's going to be there for you to get back out of it, and then maybe back into the stock market, maybe back into something else when things settle down. But right now is not that time. You need somebody that you trust and somebody you can call and make those worries go away.
That's exactly right. So you can go to flyovergold.com, fill out your information for your free consultation, or you can call 720-605-3900. Do it today.
You'll be glad you did.
Hello, Flyover family. Join me every Wednesday for the Prophetic Report at 11:11 Central. You can find it on Rumble. You can find it on the Flyover app. We have such an incredible time of hearing from all of these different prophetic voices like Robin Bullock, Julie Green, Barry Wunsch, Amanda Grace, and Hank Kuhneman. Every week, it's either 5 or 6 different prophets that are speaking, and what's interesting is God is speaking through them, and all of these voices come together like puzzle pieces. It is so exciting to hear what the Lord is saying. We're hearing from medical, we're hearing from military intelligence, we're hearing from the financial world, we're hearing from mainstream media, but the most important is, what is God saying? He has not fallen off the throne. He's not nervous. He's not chewing his nails. He is in control. He has plans to prosper us and not to harm us. What a great time to be alive, and I'm so excited for you to join me every Wednesday at 11:11.
All right, let's get our stuff together here. Hi, I'm David Whited. If we could skip the hi, my name's David part, because that's where I kind of tend to derail. Hi. But I did good. See, look. First thing it says. Say your name. Say your name, David White. Have you been wondering what to do with the spare time you have on Saturday mornings? Have I got a way for you to fill that time? Not cleaning your garage, folding your laundry, or doing something with yourself. Filling your head with worthless information about what may or may not have happened 5,000 years ago. Have you ever wondered about ancient civilizations or about chemtrails in the sky? Or have you ever had a friend at school talk to you about friend at school?
Some days when you're sitting there with your lunch pail, you're talking to your friends at school, they bring up your flat earth, and you think it's a flat earth. I don't know if your flat earth's just flat or not. I don't know, alligators are angry because they got all those teeth and no toothbrush.
And it's all true. And we talk about it every Saturday. We talk about Rubik's Cubes and stuff. We like to have conversations with people that have made documentaries, written books, Oh, this is terrible. I can like feel myself hating watching this later. Okay, give me a swoosh. Let's do this thing for real this time. I got a show for you. Hang on, my eyes red now? You won't be able to tell in there. Peter can fix it. He can run it through a filter. Can he run it through the Brad Pitt filter and get rid of my red eyes? Oh, I'm probably doing the world a disservice.